Awesome. Thank you. All right, guys. Well, welcome. Thanks for joining us today. We're going to talk about optimizing go-to-market using the tried and true revenue factory model. And I'm sure this is not the first time you guys have heard about the idea of a revenue factory. And it's been growing in popularity, I would say. Our goal today is to really just dig in and talk about what that means practically and maybe go one level deeper than you have before. So that's what we are going to do. And I've got my BFF Toni here. Great to see you, Toni.
Thank you, Mallory. Thank you for having me. Really looking forward to this, and also looking forward to, I think, probably the conversation that might develop between you and I. And let's see how we kind of weave in some of the questions that might pop up, and let's see where the audience is going to take us today.
Fantastic. All right. Well, when it comes to our list of topics, we're just going to first talk about introducing the factory itself. We're going to talk about how complicated these things actually are. And then we'll talk about the danger of a blended funnel, which is a nice, ominous, fun little subtitle there. Supply and demand, choosing your strategy before your tech stack, and then really get into those practicalities of how to improve your own factory.
That's it. And maybe kind of this is where I almost jump in. So the thinking of this revenue factory, right? Kind of, I think the interesting part here is to really put yourself almost in the shoes of actually walking into a factory, being there, looking around, seeing what's around you, and what you might see, depending on obviously the factory, but what you might see is you'll see assembly lines or factory lanes. You'll see people running around doing stuff. You'll probably see like robot arms helping assemble different things, and you'll see material kind of flowing through the assembly line, right? And all of those different items, when you really kind of think about it as a factory, I myself sometimes feel it activates different parts of my brain that I wouldn't use for go-to-market. And what I basically want to invite all of you and encourage you is to, stay in that factory and apply that part of your brain to go-to-market, which is basically kind of what we're trying to gonna do today, and walking you through some of those different examples. And bear with us. There will be, I think, situations where maybe the analogy will break or will feel weird, and that's okay. Mallory and I had this many times in prepping for this, but it's really about the way of thinking about this that's really important today. And what we hope is that might spawn new ideas for all of the folks here to change their way of running your go-to-market, and ideally doing that in a better way.
Yeah, that's awesome. All right.
And kind of the next piece here is, once you start thinking about this in a go-to-market setup, it's and this is really kind of separating yourself from like, hey, there's a superstar salesperson or sales team that kind of does all of that, all of the heavy lifting. Kind of this is what we're seeing. I think kind of embracing the factory line idea here is also about, well, their inputs, and you can call them demand that's being kind of created by the team, or leads or whatever's going to come in. Then there can be a process. A large part of that might be the sales process, but there are also processes on the marketing side and so forth. And then an output of that process basically then becomes a customer, which ultimately then is revenue, right? On a very high, simple level, this is how you can look at this. And how we have previously looked at this, all of us, is like, hey, it's just a funnel, basically. Kind of, it goes from top to bottom, and then like different stages and steps. And ultimately, kind of, this is the first transition almost for us. It's like, instead of thinking about it as a funnel, think about it as a production line with inputs, workings, processing, conversions, if you will, and then outputs coming out of this. But this is really just the simple first scratch of the surface here. And Mallory is going to take you into a little bit more how this maybe looks really under the hood.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very simple when you just glance at this analogy and you think, okay, bring things in, do things with those things, get customers on the other side. I think for all of us, doing the operations and being a CRO and being in our businesses, we know it's not really that simple. And there are so many steps involved with taking these raw inputs of names or email addresses or demand and turning those into lasting revenue. We want to have, recurring revenue. We're talking about B2B software examples here. We're talking about retention and expansion. And there really are a huge slew of steps. We've got our segmentation. When someone comes in the door, we need to assess who they are. Data enrichment needs to happen to get them going. Eventually, we're qualifying and we're trying to get them to the sales process. And so when you think about that classic sort of factory lane, it's kind of the sales process, but look how much has to happen before you even get them there, right? All these steps, all of these machines. And one thing to point out is simply, one step would be scoring a lead, for example. We want to see if it's an MQL. We want to understand if they're a good fit for us. Well, that scoring step in and of itself has its own scoring model, its own scoring software, and your ICP definition is really foundational to how that scoring works, right? So when it comes to engagement and fit, if your ICP definition has an issue, this is a very upstream situation where this one small thing upstream can really impact the velocity of your whole entire assembly line. If that ICP definition is off, you're not putting qualified demand into the system and you're going to hit slowdowns at the end, or you're going to hit a lot of churn after you get those customers on
Yeah.
board. So just, everybody's is going to look a little different, but the idea we're trying to get across here is that we know it's actually a very complex process.
And there are like so many breaking points here as well, right? I think this is, you just picked one specific one here, but again, if you think about this not as some abstract chart that we're kind of putting forward and telling, hey, this is really complicated. If you rather think about it as a production line, as an assembly line, there, if there's something going wrong upstream, this will affect everything that comes after, right? And there's so many different breakpoints, especially when you're running a more complex setup, that make this really dangerous. And I think while running the go-to-market, I've done this myself as revenue operations and then CRO later on, you kind of appreciate that there is this complexity, but really having this awareness that this chain can break at every single link. I think this is something that folks building an actual factory, I think they're way more aware of that than we are, right? And I think there's a lot of things that we can actually learn from that different kind of mindset. And we wanted to kind of create the problem and make it like, oh wow, this is all complex. So this is actually only one way of looking at the production lane. Kind of the next slide, and by the way, Mallory's doing the clicking, so I'm almost trying to, get her
You did really
prompter to
good. You
kind of
told
do
me
that.
exactly when to go.
Yeah,
Thank you, Toni.
You very likely not just have one production line. You very likely have many. And we're always thinking about the funnel, and we have just this one funnel or this demand waterfall, depends on how old you are, how you see the world right now. And the reality is you probably have many of them. You have, and then this is just one way to slice and dice your go to market is you might have inbound and outbound. Many other folks might have partners, might have referrals, might have a PLG motion, for example. And, in this example, only inbound and outbound, you might have two different segments that you're kind of servicing there. This might not necessarily need to be broken down into two different teams doing SMB and mid-market. It could be, but it doesn't have to be. It's still different funnels, actually. And why is it different? Well, an inbound SMB will simply behave completely differently from an outbound mid-market. Even outbound SMB will behave differently from an inbound SMB, right? And they can basically kind of see that this customer journey is different. And therefore, the realization needs to be, wait a minute, is this maybe its own production lane? Is it maybe its own assembly lane? And you can take this problem and kind of, further, build this up and realize, well, I mean, the US is a big place, and probably some of you have international teams, teams that are actually then working, on EMEA, working in APAC markets, and how are they maybe different? Kind of how is that actually different? And the thing here that needs to be understood is that you do not only have one funnel. You might have I mean, in this case, it's maybe 8 different variations of that. In your specific case, might be more, might be fewer. But the realization is that, you probably have more than you think right now.
Yeah, absolutely. Especially if your company sells more than one product, right? So there's lots of different ways to take that sort of factory lane analogy and apply it to different channels, different markets, different products. Um, Either way, our opinion is that it kind of looks like this. You
Yeah.
kind of have a lot of different lines. What I like about this picture is you've got your green apples and your red apples. We're acknowledging like they have differences, right? I also love about this picture the little screens where I'm imagining this is like someone's dashboard telling them if they're booking enough meetings. So
That's probably exactly what it is, right? And um, thinking about this further, right? So once you arrived at the spot and kind of recognize, okay, so we probably have many of those different customer journeys or assembly lines kind of happening here. Each of these lines might be slightly different. Some of them might be more complex. Some of them might be less faster, slower, all of that stuff. You kind of get into the next step, Mallory, which is basically trying to kind of understand, now that I have that level of thinking about this, what does this actually mean for me, right? And when you have multiple production lines, what you will be, almost be forced to think about, well, each of them should be efficient by itself. Um, and choose your way of defining efficiency, right? So usually I really like it's very practical. I like CAC payback a lot. Some other folks might like LTV over CAC or whatever it might be, but it would need to be something all encompassing, meaning marketing costs in there, sales costs in there, and then depending on the metric, CS costs in there as well. And each of these lines actually should be efficient by itself, right? You cannot have a scenario where you have lots of inefficient lanes adding up to something efficient. It doesn't work like that. Each of them themselves needs to be efficient. And that also means that you need to be thinking about improving each of them, individually and trying to figure out, again, what's the end product here? And we're going to talk about this a little bit later. What's the end product? Working my way back. Do I need the 250K OT AE to close that deal? Could that be, done differently? I'm not saying should it be PLG, but what are the different ways we can actually go about this in order to make that production line itself efficient, right? And the other way to think about it also is, why should one assembly line subsidize another one? I think it makes sense in some cases in a strategic decision. Let's just say your home market is the US and you wanna open up a London office and start building a beachhead into Europe. In the beginning, it's probably going to be more expensive to do that over there than to do it in your home market. And then there's a strategic consideration. I totally get it. This is going to cost me a bit of a premium for a while, but that should be clear to you, and you should be willing that you want to basically kind of pay that additional price. And then the other thing also might be that your demand might fluctuate between those different assembly lines. Your inbound motion might dry up a little bit, and then maybe you need to jump in and kind of add additional more outbound or different markets and so forth, right? And once you kind of have that expectation that should be the standard actually for you and how you treat this whole thing, I think then it really goes into, well, we need to actually measure all of these things differently. We actually need to try and figure out what was expected behavior versus what is the actual behavior that we're seeing. Kind of what is my flexibility to move around resources to, and this is, you wouldn't do this on a daily basis, but quarterly or annually. Hey, if there's a production line that's really inefficient, why would I resource it further? Why wouldn't I instead take resources away and put them into the production lanes that are actually way more efficient, which overall, by the way, increases your efficiency, right? And all of that, and trying to tie this back to the factory floor, that there needs to be skilled, we haven't found a great name for this yet, Mallory, but skilled floor managers, skilled factory floor managers, that basically kind of see this, understand this, monitor this, change things around, and really then, use those insights to make, you could say, strategic, or factory, I don't know, architectural kind of changes to that, right? And
Yeah.
that's almost the level of thinking we want to get you all into, to the kind of number one, see that it's complicated, see that there's different lanes, but also that your focal point of improving actually has to be on the lowest level here in order then to build efficiencies up.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I don't think you can make those decisions without the visibility into the different pieces.
Yeah.
And so whatever that segmentation strategy is going to be, it could be geographic, it could be by product, it could be by motion. Um, we just have to make those decisions and then dive in that way. So let's look at a little example of this. I think we've all been in these situations where we're doing our planning for the upcoming year. We had 2,500 MQLs last year, and that got us about 1.5 million in ARR. For this year, we're growing a lot. We need to double. We need 5,000 MQLs. And logic would help you see, hey, that could be $3 million. We're going to double everywhere around. Well, if you look a little deeper at our motions here, we've got our demo channel, which actually brought in 1.25 out of that 1.5 million. And by the way, that was only 500 of the 2,500 MQLs. So one channel is bringing in much more efficiency, much bigger deals, much better payback than the other. So when you apply this to this year and you say, okay, we're going to double everywhere, maybe we get only 600 demos and we get 4,400 webinars. So it's very easy to grow webinars because we can go pay for attendees. Not so easy to grow demos because those need to be people who have the right timing. They want to raise their hand. They're choosing to come to you. You've got less control. So at this point, you've able to hit your 3,000, or I'm sorry, your 5,000 goal. But when you translate that through the factory and you do the math, you're coming up to 2 million in ARR, not 3 million like you thought. So doubling your volume did not double your ARR because you weren't looking closely enough at the pieces that made up those averages. And that's really just the danger of averages. And so when we talk about unblending the funnel, the idea here is that we understand enough to say, hold on a minute, the demos are what drove that ARR. What needs to happen to grow those? We can't just set a goal for doubling MQLs.
Yeah. And I think this is, I don't think any CMO or, whoever is kind of, planning like this is trying to be, is trying to cheat or trying to be evil about this. But there is on a higher level, right? Sometimes the CFO creates this budget, and then it says 5,000 MQLs. And then you as a marketing leader is like, no way, I'm just gonna double my my high intent demo request. No way, I'm gonna do that. But I have this 5K target, so I'll figure out how to get us to 5K. And I think this is where some of that disconnect is happening. That can be extremely costly for organizations,
Mm-hmm.
but not necessarily. I don't want to say on purpose, right? I've talked to a lot of marketing leaders, and they're kind of also stuck in that situation that they were given a target like that basically comes out of like a spreadsheet math like this. And the danger here obviously is to simply skip over this very simple fact. And I'm sure majority of the people are like, yeah, Mallory, Toni, cool. I've seen that before. I know how this thing works. But in reality, what we're seeing in practice is a lot of people are skipping over that very important fact and then wonder, why are we missing our revenue target at the end, right? And it's
Mm-hmm.
basically a way to show an example of not splitting to different assembly lines, which is kind of what we're getting back to here, how that can create a dangerous gap for you in your plan.
Yeah. And even if we intuitively know that the pieces of the whole don't behave the same,
Mhm.
I've met a lot of operators who have a hard time explaining that, or they have a hard time showing that to the CFO to help him or her understand this is why it's not that simple. It's not dollar in, dollar out. There's so many different ways that you can invest and grow, and not so easy to double, is it, Toni?
Exactly.
Talk to us
So
about Simpson's paradox.
yeah, let me wait. I forgot my glasses. But basically, what this is about, and we struggled where to put it in the deck, but we wanted to kind of just show it to educate everyone. But really, it's the idea that if you take one specific look at your data set, it might actually fool you. And so I tried to translate this here into like a B2B SaaS kind of context, and it's not, perfect in that sense. But because the idea is on the left-hand side, you basically have it split it out. You have kind of two different samples. One is maybe your mid-market product, and the other one is the enterprise product. And let's just say on the one axis, sales cycles and ACV. It doesn't fully work out. Kind of bear with me. But if you blend those two things together, right, what previously on the left-hand side looks like a very clear correlation between the higher the ACV, the higher the sales cycle, or the other way around rather, what looks pretty clear is actually completely reversed on the other side when you don't do the blend, right? And there are so many examples in our day-to-day data where we're basically kind of seeing exactly that thing happening. And we're asking ourselves, like, how can this be? Kind of, this is going in this direction. Kind of, we need to, change something in order to facilitate that. But we might actually end up changing the wrong thing, or putting changing the wrong thing in the right thing in the wrong direction, right? And I think I'm stumbling a little bit here with this example, but Simpson's paradox really kind of, as you segment out your data, you might actually catch completely different trends that you might have been unaware of, and without knowing it, might have made the wrong decision here. Mallory, can you help me out here a little bit? Maybe you can bring this better.
No, I think you've got it. It's just that on the surface, averages are going to tell one story. And when you dig in, the real story is in those details. And
Yeah.
so, um, you know, maybe this is what you need to explain it to the CFO. That's the
Yeah, there you
answer.
go. And we wanted to kind of, we did the MQL demo webinar thing. We wanted kind of to do a split funnel one level higher on a CAC payback level, actually, right? And now we're kind of talking about outbound versus inbound. And yes, we all now heard you need to drive towards profitable, efficient growth. This is the thing. It's not growth at all costs anymore, yada yada. But really, here's an example of okay, outbound is, I mean, whatever flavor of the day kind of is outbound alive, is it not? But in this case, outbound is apparently the more efficient channel. The CAC payback is 13. Maybe you have a target of 12. This is super close to it. So really, in this motion, you would say like, actually, let's divest out of inbound because hey, there's apparently a CAC payback of 16, and put all the money into outbound, right? And I would say like, well, not so fast. Let's kind of, let's double click on the inbound piece. And here then, when you do that, sorry, this is very EMEA example here. Let's just do the Northwest and whatever. But when you kind of dive into this, you might actually realize that, your German-speaking region and, your UK and I is actually actually, this is kind of working out. This is actually even better or outcompeting the unblended outbound piece. What you do have, though, is you have some areas, Nordics and France, that are apparently actually not performing as well, and that are basically overall pulling up your CAC payback into an area that is comparing to some of the other motion is actually in the red, right? And the idea here is, number one, if you don't do the unblending, again, you will actually not see that there are trends in the data, trends in your factory that you're completely missing out on. And then on top of that, you can actually ask yourself now, which is extremely powerful. You can ask yourself like, okay, so why is German-speaking region, so DACH, this is German-speaking, why is the German-speaking region performing so well? Why is that actually the case? What can we learn here that we may be missing out in some of the other regions, that maybe are missing even out in, our home market in the US? But then also, on the opposite of that, well, what's going wrong in France? Why is this not working out? And isn't even worth our while? Should we even continue working here, or should we actually leave that market, take that money, and rather put it somewhere else? And now you can make the decision, because now you have like money, cash in your hand. You can either say, you know what, actually, we want to be more profitable. Let's just put it back in the bank account. Or you can say, let's put it, into the German-speaking region, UKI, because we see an opportunity to drive more. Or you can go to, outbound. You can maybe go to the CST. Maybe there's an opportunity to improve, generating revenue, reducing churn, etc. And this is really, especially with all of those fixed budgets, or kind of shrinking budgets rather, that we're all faced with, this is a way to improve your efficiency without needing necessarily to kind of have more budget in order to drive it, right? So that's really what we want to encourage you all to think about when you kind of encountering those different assembly lines. There might actually be pockets here that are pulling you in the wrong direction, and that can be a great opportunity for you to either learn something or free up funds and distribute them differently.
Awesome. Absolutely. So let's talk about supply.
Yes.
For those of you who might not remember, this is the picture of the tanker ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal. So what's your take on this, Toni?
Yeah. So you know, you have the factory, and you obviously need to have supplies coming in. And what, you know, the image I want to create in your heads is you're standing in this factory, and there are all of those robot arms. They're usually yellow. I don't know why. They're usually yellow, I feel.
So you don't bump into them.
Yeah, yeah. And by the way, I recently learned it's different brands. So you have red ones is a different brand than yellow ones. Anyway, doesn't matter. So the thing is, I want you to picture this factory and those assembly lines, and you have all of those robot arms kind of just standing there, you know, not doing anything because there's no material kind of flowing through, right? And the end result, when you know, stand at the end of the assembly line and you measure how much output was created, aka revenue was created, you see like, oh wow, it's actually not that much money here. So what should we do? Should we maybe add more robot arms? And when you think about it like this, you know, when I say it like this, everyone is like, obviously not, Toni. I mean, why would you do that? Obviously, that's not the problem. But what is pretty weird is that this is how so many organizations over so many years and still to this day address revenue shortcomings. It's like, let's just add more AEs, or let's add more quota and so forth, right? So on the next slide, what we're kind of trying to have you think about, right? And this is really removing yourself or kind of, you know, going further into the assembly line idea, and then thinking about, well, who are the different people? And this might be people or automation, software, AI, whatever you think of, that are basically manning the different workbenches that you have there. Is that working out in the right way? Are they doing the right things? Are they having the right skills, etc.? But also, are they having enough stuff to work on, right? And this is a very simple, and it can super quickly get super complex. But what I would encourage everyone to think about is, especially when creating your hiring plan for the AEs and thinking about quota and so forth, trying to do a very simple supply and demand calculation. And on the supply side is, well, what's the material coming into the factory? How much is there actually? Kind of how many deals you know, can we generate? You can either start from this side or from the other side. It's like, well, how many customers do we need? How many opportunities is that then that we need to generate? And you will very quickly, if you do this in a bottom-up fashion, will realize like, hey, we can only get to X, right? And that is basically the supply. This is the material you have. And then the question you can ask yourself is, well, how many AEs do I actually need in order to work through those opportunities? And by the way, I totally appreciate that. There will be some folks here that are having very heavy enterprise businesses where this is a little bit different, right? Kind of where that math doesn't fully math. But ultimately, really thinking about, you know, how many folks do actually need to work through this? And that then can obviously also impact your conversion rates, right? Thinking about, I mean, no one has too many opportunities, by the way. The few opportunities we have, instead of trying to give everyone a little bit, we can actually, you know, dedicate them to the key closers that we have that maybe have the highest win rates, and maybe we don't need anyone else than that, right? And there's all kinds of math that you can go through and think about, but there's also another test that I would recommend everyone, you know, maybe to do with the sales team is go and check out their calendars. Kind of, are there, you know, go on Google Calendar and Outlook, see how many meetings they have with externals per day, you know, per week. And there are some rules of thumb. I think, you know, depending on the motion and so forth, kind of maybe two external meetings, 3 external meetings a day is good. If you're below that, that means you're actually not actually maxing out the capacity, right? And that might give you a clue. Maybe you don't need that many AEs, and ergo your conversion rate might go up because you're gonna, lose the ones that are, not performing so well, and really have that supply and demand balancing in the back of a mind here that you maybe want to achieve, right? And again, this is kind of a way to reason your way through how many you should be staffing on the different workbenches. And that concept also applies to your CSMs, also to your pre-sales engineers, to your inbound SDRs, to
Mhm.
whomever you might have, thinking about, well, how many do I actually need in order to work through this? Mallory?
I think that's amazing. It's exactly right. And I was thinking back because I've been in a couple of companies where we set next year's plan by adding 20% more headcount, adding 20% more quota, and away we go, right? And why would that not work? And I remember those days. And if I transport myself back, I recall that the sales team was unhappy.
Mm-hmm.
They heard that we were hiring and they didn't like it. And at the time, I couldn't figure it out. I didn't understand. And now I totally understand because, you know, you don't want to hire when they are not busy enough. And they are the ones on the ground who understand this person is going to take meetings from me. Like
Yeah.
now, one of my inbounds is going to go to this new person. And so, with your count of meetings, I think that's a really good tip and benchmark. And the point is, the reps have to be busy enough where when they hear you're going to add another rep, they sigh of relief and say, oh, thank you. That's what I need. I need another partner because I'm too busy. I know we can go further together. I'm
Mm-hmm.
ready for you to grow this team. And I just remember being so confused by that in the past. And I'm seeing on the chat here, what is the abbreviation here? That's quota on the street, right, Tony?
Yeah, that's right. Yes.
Yeah. So hiring more people and assigning them a quota gives you a certain total number of quota on the street, all the total of the reps quotas out there. When your quota on the street goes up and your bookings stay flat, just keep in mind like that's less efficiency in your business. And so
Yep.
um, love the fact that Aaron is agreeing here. Um, Talk to your reps, make sure that they agree that you're ready to grow. And I think that's an overlooked thing, just as much as we overlook checking out the calendars. I think that's really good advice, Tony.
I think another fallacy is sometimes, and this is the growth at all cost times. And again, right, we're saying like, hey, this was then, now there's something else. I don't think everyone understands what they need to change in their business in order to be more efficient. And that's why I'm kind of pointing this out. Um, I think still people are planning in a way where they think capacity first, kind of how many folks do I need to support this target that the CFO chose, without
Mhm.
actually, understanding and realizing how much pipeline or opportunities or whatever you want to call it, you need to build in order to support this, right? And this then, because of ramp up, which maybe sometimes is 9 months, leads in a position where, marketing already in March or April is not actually delivering to the growth that you wanted to have. You may be behind on SDR hiring. You may be behind on all the other components, but you're kind of in a tricky situation because if you don't hire the AEs now, you won't have them ramp for Q4, right? So what do people do? They end up hiring those AEs, which then, increases the quota on the street. The bookings are not coming along, and then basically in Q4 you sit there, and you have a lot of unhappy folks sitting around, right? And having a closer eye on that, having that realization, I think this would have helped me 2 businesses ago, not make really, really expensive mistakes. And, to your point, Mallory, kind of also, happened probably to you as well.
Yeah, I think we all did it. So
Yeah,
we're all in the same boat.
that's it.
Okay, let's transition a little bit here. I think we have beat our point into the ground that you cannot look at it as one average funnel. I think you guys are definitely resonating with this concept of like capacity planning and being really smart about having enough supply so that your factory is always busy. So those have been kind of 2 takeaways so far. And then we want to shift and think now about what are we making? What is this factory, really here for? And some would say we're making the customer experience or we're making value for our customers. I think those are absolutely true. Some people would just say, hey, we're making money. Like, yes, we are here to grow our businesses, right? But in this particular picture, you see a guy who's hand stitching a steering wheel for a car. And Eddie, our CEO over at Union Square, he brought up this analogy a while ago and I loved it. He said, if you know you want a hand stitched steering wheel, you have to hire the person who can do that stitching. And you know that that hand stitching is not as efficient as the robots who are putting the doors on to the body of the car. But you're making that choice to have a less efficient step to get the quality you want, to have a luxury car, to put the thing in the place where it's going to make your car more marketable. And so, in this sense, what we're doing is we're thinking about the outcome we want, a luxury car with a pretty steering wheel, and then we're staffing accordingly. We're going to hire a person whose job it is to do this. And they're not going to rush through it. They're going to do a good job so that we've got these awesome steering wheels. And so for us, it's really just about beginning with the end in mind. You don't build a big factory and then like sit down and say, okay, what should we make here? We have this big factory. What should we make? It's the opposite. You know what you want to produce, and then you staff the right machines and the right people to get it done. And that's the takeaway for me. And so I thought we could talk a little just about the journey that we all, tend to go through in software. And in the very beginning, we've got our MVP, our minimally viable product, the very first version. Not a lot of process in this phase because we are testing everything. We're throwing things at the wall. We're having interviews with our, desired audience to see if they find value in it. But eventually we get to step 2, and that's our product market fit. So we have advanced enough to have a product and a strategy, an idea of how we're going to go to market. In this phase, in step 2, still not a lot of process here because, we're just getting started with going to market. When we get to step 3, we're getting a little bit more advanced, and this is when we have our go to market fit. A lot of us here on the call are probably either in step 3 or step 4. And these are the most common businesses I think that we tend to work with at Union Square. But the idea here is that in step 3, once you find that go-to-market fit, you're probably experiencing faster growth, and your process normally does not keep up with your evolving strategy at this point. So you've been going to market for a while, you're growing like crazy, and all of a sudden your process doesn't support it. It's like, well, what do we do now? That's when everyone realizes, okay, we got to scale this thing. We have to get some of these machines fixed up if we want to be able to build the whole car. We want to be able to grow, and we want to be able to scale the business. And so step 4 is kind of that later stage. You're not necessarily mature yet, but you're ready to scale where your strategy is driving the process and driving the tech stack. And so my advice to people is, hey, don't put your tech stack before your strategy. If you're putting your tech stack first, you're going to go buy a bunch of machines and then hope that you can make something out of it that uses those machines correctly. If you put your strategy first and you say, here's what I'm going to make, here's how I want to score leads, here's how I want to nurture leads. Now I need to go find the tools that are going to allow me to get this done. And so really it's just an order of operations of making sure that your technology is actually going to work for you.
And I think what I would add to this, right? And Mallory, you're totally right. I think most of the folks here are like step 3, step 4. I myself, like Growblocks, we're step 2 basically. And the realization that I have, right? Kind of, I've been a RevOps leader, I've been a CRO, I've done, all of this scale up stuff. And now I'm in this scrappy phase. And I can actually very much sympathize and understand how you're getting sometimes into those situations where you make all of those mistakes, right? Because you're scrambling, you're stumbling forward, and something works out, and suddenly you see yourself and have 100 employees, 200 employees, 500 employees, and suddenly some of the things that you have built previously don't work anymore. And I think the mindset here that is really important, and I hope folks here on the call kind of have that a little bit. It's actually really important to look at the factory that has been built, and yes, ask sometimes the question, like, have we built the right factory here actually? Kind of for the outcome that we wanted to achieve, is that actually the right way still to do it? Do we need to change something for, different subsegments here? And that then really comes with not only changing, the strategy maybe around it, the process, and then ultimately the tooling in the end, right? I just wanted to, because usually the mess is created by us founders. And I just wanted to,
You're the problem.
exactly, right. And just wanted to, say that like, hey, I sympathize by now.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So, we're coming down the road here. We're at 12:43 by my clock. We want to save a couple minutes for questions. We are getting to the end. And side question, Drew. Hi, Drew. It is you on the bike. I know that you've got your helmet in all your avatars. So that was for you. um, so now let's think about how this applies to us, right? What's going on in my factory? How's it working? What can I work on? What do I need to adjust? First, I wanted to give Toni a chance to talk about how he can help you unblend the funnel. And he is very humble and he's not going to say this, so I will say it. Growblocks is like the way to look at this stuff. And anyone who hasn't seen it yet, like I highly recommend that you go check it out. I'll let him talk about the specifics of it, but like basically anything that you need to unblend, Toni can help you unblend it. So there's your pitch, Toni.
I'm not sure what to. I mean, I'm from Germany. I'm shy. I wouldn't kind of, I don't like this self-promotional thing here. But ultimately, so thank you for the tee up here. I think you want to have two things, right? You want to basically get full funnel visibility, understand what's going on, have the ability to drill in, explore another segment. And that also comes with the traffic light stuff, really understanding what was the expectation, where was this processing step to go, where did we actually land. And what we found is that it's incredibly difficult to kind of get to that level of insight for most organizations. And that's what we've built here, right? And behind that is, imagine it as a revenue modeling plus BI kind of setup. Not gonna
Oh, did we lose you,
out.
Toni?
I should be still here, actually. Am I?
Yep, keep going.
Sorry. And then the next slide here is really about understanding and seeing, yes, understanding and seeing your different efficiencies, right? And kind of this is really about tracking and CAC payback, for example, across your different revenue streams, across your different motions, seeing that also with capacity of your CSMs, AEs, and so forth. Those are always on a higher level. So this is what you would be looking at probably on a quarterly level or so to understand, where you have maybe room to improve and maneuver here. But thank you, Mallory, for the opportunity here to do the product plug.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think it really tells the exact story because here we're looking at our averages and we know this is dangerous, right? So we still need those. Like we still have to tell people the answers to the questions in an overarching average. But the previous slide where you're breaking out inbound, outbound PLG on the left, this is where we are unblending it. And so the point is you can have an answer and still look at the pieces that make up the whole, which I think is great. So having that visibility into what's happening is just so important. All right. One more example that we wanted to share with you guys before we finish up here is from my time at Nihilus. And I can't take credit for this example that I'm about to share. This was all our wonderful product team that we had at Nihilus. But here is the original journey or the original factory, if you will, that was necessary for a free trial person to get through the process of building with Nihilus and become a customer. And where you see these pink lines, there were all kinds of places you had to backtrack. So you had to go to the docs webpage and then go back to your product and then go here and then go there. And it was very complicated. What the team decided to do was to completely overhaul this experience into straight lines. And this was an example, like Aaron said, or someone said it in the chat, Jason, if your factory is not right, that's okay. You have the power to change it. And, you might have to lobby for that. You might have to go tell your story to get people on board. But if you know it needs a change, let's talk about that, right?
Mm-hmm.
And as operators, bringing that topic to our leadership and saying, hey, this is an issue, like we need to change X, Y, and Z. That's the exact sort of like strategic counsel that we want to be for our business. So anyway, this is
I
what
would
we
even,
changed
sorry,
it
I
to.
would even say it's your responsibility. I would even go
Yeah,
one
yeah,
step further in this actually kind of at the end of the day, you know, you were hired for a specific reason because you have deep expertise in something and you care to join a session like this because you want to keep educating yourself. Some of the other
yeah.
folks might not, right? And kind of it's therefore your responsibility as the expert with this specific problem to raise your hand and address it, right? And that, you know, granted, depending on your influence internally, that might not work out, but I think you actually have to do it.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's a good responsibility to have. Okay, so back to this example, what we did, or what the product team did, is they redesigned the platform, and the user experience to get from point A to point Z became this nice straight line. Um, as operations, what my job then was to find a way to make our supporting technology and processes do the same evolution. And the reason that I wanted to show this is because when I joined the company, none of this was written down. No one could see an image like this. And therefore, no one really understood the ways that we were struggling. And so in this diagram, what you'll see is like some disconnected websites up here at the top. Anywhere you have these little red lines with a slash, these were tools that were not connected correctly to the sources of data where we needed to be able to see what was happening. And so they were breakpoints in our factory where we no longer had visibility into what the customer was doing. And it took a long time and a lot of interviews to get this documented. But until it was documented, we really didn't have the ability to go walk a factory floor. And I think that's the point that I want to leave you with is like, if you want to know how to apply this to your business and get started, chances are, if you don't have this diagram for your company, that's where you should start. Because if you can't see the picture of what's supposed to be happening, you don't have a way to get in there and analyze where you might have a break point. So identifying where we had issues was step one. And then as our end result, we were able to totally reconnect all the things in the Nihilist Revenue Factory. These are the technologies that ended up supporting the customer experience that we needed. And so you'll see we no longer have any red circles, right? We got those all fixed up. In our case, we definitely had to adopt a tool like Segment to get our users' actions recorded as events. And that was the missing piece. We got all these websites connected. We swapped out Marketo for HubSpot. We implemented Segment. We did a lot of work to rehash this thing. And it did take, by the way, like a full year. So this is not quick and easy. But my advice to get started is to just start writing these things down. That's kind
Mhm.
of the main tip here.
That's it. We have one question from Tracy actually.
Yes.
How do you support a CEO who says we go after anything, everything right now as a strategy? I'd love to have your take, and then I'll give mine.
Sometimes I think that is a fine strategy. The key is if we're going to go after anything and everything, fine. Do we have the capability to see anything and everything as an unblended funnel once they get in the door? And if we do, then we can learn from that. So if we're going to go after anything and everything, let's just make sure we have the visibility into what starts to work. And if that's the phase we want to be in and dedicate ourselves to that, that's a conscious decision. And hopefully there's, money in the bank to propel you through it. But I have seen that exact same thing. Sometimes it's necessary.
Yeah, I think
Thank you. Sure.
there you go. I'll also give my spin on this, Tracy. I think it sometimes comes also from a spot of you know, a defensive position actually, kind of, hey, we have to, we kind of can't do anything else about this. Um, and then it's really difficult to navigate this as a RevOps leader. I'm not sure kind of what your role is, Tracy, to kind of say like, well, we
Mhm.
shouldn't. I think it's difficult to kind of be that person that, hey, no, we can't do this. I think, and I think having appreciation for that and kind of understanding the situation that the CEO is actually in, kind of he or she needs to try and find money somewhere, is important. One deflating thing that I usually kind of encounter is, whatever you build next, Like if you want to go into a new segment, PLG, inbound, whatever you want to add on top, your CEO needs to realize it's minimal. It's going to take you 12 months. You know, whatever it's going to be adding on top is going to take 12 months. And then the question is to ask, like, well, do you or do we have the stamina to wait another 12 months before we actually see money coming out of this thing, right? And that that deflates the hunger for these things usually pretty quickly, at least for myself, and also work with CEOs that I work with.
Yeah, great. No, that's very helpful. And part of it is, and I really liked your comment too, Mallory, about, you know, if that's the mandate right now, because yes, we just need revenue, track everything that does come in. So at least when things sort of, okay, we're where we need to be, now we can see what we want to focus on in terms of those various motions. That's great. And then also, thanks, Toni. Yeah, the reality check of you know, how long it might actually take to implement. And part of what I've seen too is that when the CEO is just saying we really need to focus on getting revenue, you know, then marketing will say, well, if we want to, you know, increase our brand awareness and touch points and get out there, we need this tool to help us. And then the head of sales will say, well, then you know, so then it still contributes a little bit to that fractured, siloed approach when everyone is focusing on what each function needs in order to then that growth. But I'm sure, you know, something I'm sure a lot of companies are experiencing in the last year or so. But yeah, thank you. Very helpful.
Definitely.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Nice.
When you start documenting everything, if you include enough technology, it will encompass multiple departments. And so that's a great way to connect the dots there.
Perfect. Yeah, thank you. Makes
cool.
sense.
Well, I think we did it, friends. We can give you a couple minutes back in your day unless there are more questions. Awesome. All right. Well, we will end it here. Thank you all for joining. Thank you, Toni, for entertaining us and being here.
Entertaining you. Wonderful. Thanks for having me. Thanks for the conversation, and really nice to meet you all, and have a good one. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.